Where can you find 6,000 local businesses with just one click? EverythingMidmo.com.
Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes Webcast. This is sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Today we'll talk about the Oklahoma State game, and then tomorrow's webcast we'll look forward to the Texas homecoming game. Dave, Missouri loses 33-17 to Oklahoma State. I guess maybe the most widely talked about thing from that game was Blaine Gabbert. Is his ankle affecting him pretty seriously in these last two games? He was missing a lot of throws high, obviously was hobbling around a little.
Right. Well, I think it's affecting him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's really stifled his running ability, and he's not any kind of threat to run the ball like he was the first couple weeks of the season. And, it probably has something to do with some of his throws, too. I mean, David Yost, offensive coordinator, has admitted that. He's had to change his throwing mechanics a little bit, but not to the point where they don't want to play him. They think that, that's just part of playing the quarterback position where you have to adjust to some bumps and bruises. In his case, a sprained ankle. There's a lot of talk around Missouri's fan base that the right thing to do is to sit him down and play Jimmy Costello, the backup. I think some of that, though, is just based on the fact that they lost those games. If Missouri wins those two games, maybe wins one of them, I think Gabbert's probably looked at instead as a Willis Reed type, the courageous hero who led the team to victory on a bad leg. And he looked pretty good in that first half. He threw for 300 yards, before halftime against a decent Oklahoma State defense. So I think at this point people are frustrated with the losses and they're trying to point at one thing. And right now that's Gabbert's ankle. There are a lot of I think we always, after a loss, we always hear from all the offensive coordinators around the fan base. I think right now we're discovering that Missouri fans, that there are a lot of orthopedic surgeons out there who know what's best for Blaine and his ankle and that he should be rest. But in all of this, I kind of feel bad for Carl Geddes. He sprained his ankle against Nebraska too, and he's out there playing, and nobody's too concerned about him and wanting him to get benched. But I think it just comes with the territory of playing quarterback. The camera's on Blaine all the time, and anytime he has a little limp or a little gimpy to the sideline, there's kind of a panic among fans, and that's the reason for any throw that he makes that isn't caught. So they're just they got to protect him. That's what it comes down to this week, and they did a pretty good job of that last week. We'll see how they move on.
Yeah, it almost affects him more, I think, in the running game because most of Missouri's running, I think they only have, 5 running plays or something like that, and 2 of them at least he has the option to keep the ball, and so defenses are just basically daring him to keep it. You saw that on a 3rd and goal play where they ran the zone read and he keeps it.
Sure.
And so at this point he's so hobbled with that's not anybody's idea of what they want to do. So I think it maybe affects him almost more in the running game than the passing game. But he did seem to be kind of shooting everything high, at least in the beginning of the game. So that was a little different than what we'd seen from him in the past. So I think it is affecting him, but for the people who say, well, why don't you play Costello for this game? You're probably not going to beat Texas anyway. You only get 12 games.
Right.
I mean, that would be tantamount to forfeiting. That makes no sense.
You can't
to
coach
me.
Scared. I mean, you have to put your best player out there even if he is hobbled a little bit.
All right. In Gary Pinkel's press conference yesterday, he kind of made a point to say we need to run the ball more. We should run the ball more, which I'm assuming is a message that has been delivered to David Yost also. You look at the Oklahoma State game, they throw the ball 44 times, run it 24. Do you think for the rest of the season we are going to see more of a balanced approach, and would that benefit?
Well, we'll believe it when we see it. They've said this before, that they went into the season saying that they were going to run the ball a lot more, and they've steadily gotten away from that approach. In the first half at Oklahoma State, the running backs averaged 5 yards a carry, so you would just assume that was going to keep up in the second half, at least that approach. And it really didn't. Derek Washington had 3 carries and netted 0 yards. Devin Moore had 1 nice run for 15 yards, and that was all those guys got because Missouri, even though down just 2 scores at that point, really settled in on making Blaine Gabbert win the game with his arm, and we saw that didn't work very much. But, David Yost explained yesterday that the game plan going in was to throw the ball a lot early on, go downfield, attack them with taking some shots deep, and that worked. I mean, they didn't complete them all, but I think they backed things up a little bit and were effective in that. Then they wanted to lean on the run more in the second half. I think going along with that, they wanted to make sure that they got the score closer before they could do that, and they never did, so we never saw the running game appear again. But from what Pinkel said yesterday, it was kind of a subtle suggestion that we might see more running, but again, this week against Texas, it's not the best week to all of a sudden, want to lean on your running game.
The number one rushing defense in the nation.
Right.
Yeah, I thought this game in particular, the Nebraska game, I could understand why they weren't running it quite as much because they weren't getting anywhere. This time they were. I mean, Missouri's offensive line, I thought, did a pretty decent job, at least in the first half, of opening up holes for those guys. They were getting pretty good chunks. And the passing game was a little more erratic this time, so I was a little surprised they didn't stick with it a little longer.
Yep.
Danario Alexander had a big game and has really had a good year. He was a bit of a question mark coming in just because of all the injury problems, but now he's played 6 games without injury, which for him is a pretty good stretch.
Right.
What have you thought of his progress this year, and then maybe even as a pro prospect, what do you think?
Well, he has established himself as one of the very best in the Big 12. Putting together a midseason All-Big 12 team right now, and he's definitely on that first team up there with the best receivers in the country, and you find some of the best in the Big 12, but you find some of the best receivers in the country in the Big 12, and I think he's among the conversation there. He's their number one guy. He's the guy that Blaine looks for all the time, and he still gets it done time after time like he did against Oklahoma State. And Gabbert said on Monday that defenses are starting to key on him a little bit more, and he's still finding ways to get open. That's the biggest thing in this offense is being able to get separation and get open, and that's what he's doing. He's making great gains after the catch, which was something I think we probably wondered if he could still do, and he's been great at that. And you look at his pro potential, if he runs a good 40 time, and from what he's doing out there, it looks like he's fast enough to get away from defenders. He looks kind of like a prototypical NFL guy, and not necessarily a first-round pick, but he looks like a number one receiver, kind of a Brandon Marshall type, a 6'4" guy that can go up and get the ball and make plays after the catch. So I think the sky's the limit for him at this point.
Seems like with guys looking forward to the NFL, the whole senior year they're built up, and then as soon as their senior year is over, you hear everything wrong with them. And I think the thing you'll hear about him, obviously, is his injury history, which is going to scare people a little. But I think when he does go to the combine, if he goes or does work out for those guys at the pro days, his athleticism will jump out at him, and they fall in love with that. I think Andy Hilt said yesterday he tested better in the vertical jump than anybody they've ever had at Missouri.
Yeah.
So with his size and ability to leap, I think he's a guy that could be a pretty tempting guy for the NFL if he stays healthy the rest of this year.
Right, if he stays healthy.
Lastly, we're going to talk about the Big 12 North, which we did last week, but it really got shuffled. I don't know if it got shuffled, but it got basically thrown into more disarray this week with basically the teams we probably would have predicted to kind of take the lead here with Kansas and Nebraska both losing, and get Kansas State now in first place. Is there a favorite going forward in your mind?
I don't know. I really don't know if we can say there is. I still look at the teams that we thought all along would be the best teams that have the most talent, and that would be Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri. But they all definitely have some flaws. I don't think they're as significantly better than the other 3 teams as we thought. Iowa State looks pretty competitive. I think they could spoil some games for a couple of those favorites. So I don't know. At this point, you kind of look at the schedule and who people have to play. I think Kansas still has the best offense of all the teams in the North, but they still play Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Texas, Nebraska, and Missouri. That's 5 tough games there, and they've already got 1 conference loss against Colorado. So, I think 5-3 still wins this division. Like we talked about last week, I think there's going to probably be some ties at the top because there's just not that much separation between the best teams in this league. I'd be surprised if at the end of the year there's a ranked team from the North. Right now there's just one with Kansas. They're barely hanging on.
Yeah, I think maybe the bottom 3, we thought there was a big separation between Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri at the top, and then Colorado, Kansas State, Iowa State at the bottom, and I guess maybe there isn't quite as much as we thought. The other weird thing that could happen, Colorado has a pretty favorable schedule. If they were to win out, they could not win out, but if they were to win the Big 12 North at 6-6, then lose in the Big 12 title game, they could basically be the Big 12 North champion and not even be eligible for a bowl game.
That's true.
Which would be a bit of a black eye for a division that most people don't have a whole lot of respect for anyway. We'll see how it plays out, but I definitely could see 4-4 now winning this division on a tiebreaker.
Oh, definitely, yeah, and I think 5-3 wins it, no doubt.
Okay, we'll tune in tomorrow when we'll discuss the Texas game in more detail.